One thing that I asked myself when I first saw the Resident Evil trailer was, what makes Resident Evil Resident Evil? Is it the stupid, campy, but quite complex and interesting story? Is it the characters that reached legendary status already within the gaming community like Leon, Claire, Chris, Jill, and many others? Is it the fact that they practically pioneered the survival horror genre, or maybe a certain game mechanic? Hello everybody, my name is Asura and today we'll be looking to answer that question alongside seeing if the Resident Evil trailer shows us that it's going to be an actual Resident Evil movie rather than just a name plaster on a poor imitation of it. I want to mention before starting that I'm a huge Resident Evil fan, as shown by this picture. I completed every single mainline game, getting all achievements alongside the two Revelation games, so you could say I have a bit of an idea on what makes Resident Evil a good game series. With that being said, let's get into it. The first thing I want to talk about is what my expectations are for this movie and what are the things that I would think would make the movie an actual representation of Resident Evil. I think that the movie should respect one simple rule, and that is respect the Resident Evil universe. Let me give you some examples. Respecting the timeline. If you are going to use a certain event from the games, it needs to be at the exact date. If we are talking about a certain place from the game, it should resemble the ones in games and it should have the same type of virus and affected. A bad example for this would be if, let's say, the last plagas from RE4 randomly show up in Raccoon City when canonically it's impossible. This also makes me remember that horrible Silent Hill movie where the story of Silent Hill 1 should take place, and randomly at one point Pyramid Head shows up, which should be a representation of James from Silent Hill that has no connection with Silent Hill 1. That was a terrible one, not gonna lie. Anyway, some other things that I think would be a great representation of RE would be maybe some fixed camera angles, over the shoulder angles, and maybe even first person ones during intense moments. Puzzles being present would be perfect, with solutions that are found with notes that leave clues to how to solve them. Them finding resources around like different weapons, accessories to them, bullets for his weapons, and so on. I think those things are mainly what would make this an actual great RE movie. With that being said, before talking about the trailer itself, let's start with the comments of the movie director Zach Kreger, who, if you did not know, directed the movie Weapons, which was quite a big success and which I quite enjoy myself. So, technically speaking, the movie should be in the right hands. Zach has mentioned that he plays some of the games and he liked them quite a lot, and the direction of the movie is an original story within the RE universe with a brand new character rather than existing ones, which he mentioned will respect the game story and vibes. He mentions that he did not want to do one of the already existing stories since, well, you just could play the games, and honestly, I understand it, although personally, I would still like a cinematic representation of the game story, and an original experience within the RE universe is exciting. The movie will take place during the Raccoon City incident, and by his own words, it will respect the canon events. Now, some other comments that he later made on are a bit questionable, leaving aside the one about the nuclear strike on RC because although it's wrong, they were thermobaric missiles, which is an honest mistake you can make. One comment that I want to address is that the movie will follow Barry, an everyday normal person rather than a military trained one, which is kind of an odd thing to say. If you ever play some of the RE games, you would know that about half of them follow a pretty normal person rather than a military trained ones. For example, since we are talking RE2 timeline for the movie, Leon was a rookie cop that almost had no training alongside Claire, who was just a normal young adult. RE7 and 8 follow the story of Ethan Winters, who again is just a normal dude, and RE9 has Grace, who although is part of FBI, she's not a field agent, she's just an analyst. So, with that being said, the first doubt for the movie starts to creep in and question if he actually played any of the games. One other comment he made that could be questionable is that he would have made this movie even if he wouldn't have gotten the license for Resident Evil, which again is walking on a thin line in my opinion. The reason for that being is because of this comment, another doubt starts to creep in. If he was to do this movie anyway, what if he just used the name of Resident Evil to make it sell better and is just using certain things from the universe without any actual care for it and just slapping labels like Umbrella and calling it a day? With that being said, let's get to the reason of today's video, and that is the trailer. The trailer starts with our protagonist Brian that is moving towards a house that looks to be on the outskirts of the city, and it's snowing. We are not even 5 seconds into the trailer and the most important rule has been broken. As per Zach, the movie should take place during the Raccoon City incident, which took place roughly from September 28th to October 1st, 1998, during at which it did not snow at all. He has broken his own promise that the movie will be canon, so we are already starting with the wrong foot. But nonetheless, it could just simply be an artistic liberty and it's of no consequence to the rest of the movie. Moving on, he enters the house, which is empty, tries to call his girlfriend that he cannot reach, and later on seems to be chased by some zombies into some kind of barn. He picks up a shotgun, and from here we got more like segmented moments from different parts of the movie, so let's talk about them. During one of the shots, he falls within the sewers, which I found quite nice considering both during the RE2 and RE3 you spend some time here, so that could be a nice reference to the games. But then this thing shows up, which quite honestly does not look like any of the infected that were present in the games. Not only this, the next scene that we are being shown is a moment where he runs from a house and this thing shows up, which, if you ask me, looks more like Laura from Evil Within than any of the infected that are available in all of the games. Now, I want to say here, I understand having your own take and your own vision, but considering that we already have a large spectrum of infected that are as horrible, or if not even worse than what we are being shown, why not choose from them? Why are we choosing to break our own promise about the canon part and create your own infected? Could they be explained in the movie as a mutation? Although it's quite a stretch, it's a possibility. Do I think it will happen? No. One positive thing that I can mention from here, he seems that during the sewer scene he has a new gun rather than the shotgun, which could indicate towards what I mentioned at the start. He will find a bunch of stuff like in the games and he will make use of them. The next shot that I want to talk about is one where he keeps a flashlight in his hand, which was quite debated online because if we are paying attention, it looks like an iPhone. Once again, breaking the timeline since, well, iPhones did not exist in 1998. Now, people online mentioned it could be this 90 degrees flashlight, but if I'm being honest, to me it looks like more like an iPhone than a flashlight, and at this point the trust has already been broken. Not only that, but the next scenes show some cars that are from 2000s rather than the 90s. Also, in this scene, Brian runs from which I can only assume are some infected, and from the rooftops, zombies randomly fall on the ground and they get absolutely obliterated. At this point, I'm quite lost, to be honest. That's the final scene we are being shown. After that is just the name of the movie and the date it launches, September 18th. With those things being exposed before us, let's finally answer the question that I made this whole video about. Do I think this is going to be a Resident Evil movie? No. Do I think this is going to be a good movie? Yeah, I think most likely it's going to be a pretty good movie, but most definitely not a Resident Evil movie. Now, don't get me wrong, the trailer does seem to catch some of the vibe of Resident Evil, but to me, that's not quite enough because a lot of things can have the same vibe and feel. After all, survival horror involving zombies is quite common. What makes Resident Evil different from the others, which I already mentioned at the start and as seen, I don't see much of that in the trailer. Not only that, the promise he made of the fact that he will respect the story and the canon events was broken right from the start. To me, this whole thing feels weird and quite honestly disrespectful. Although I know the movie is going to be quite good, it will still not be an actual representation of the games. It just feels like somebody that played most likely just one or two games, maybe not even in full, saw some interesting things that he quite did not understand, took those elements and made his own movie. Later on, as he said, got the rights to call it Resident Evil and just slapped a bunch of things on top of the already finished concept, such as Raccoon City, and is probably going to have the name Umbrella somewhere, and called it a day. I know it's going to be better than the previous Resident Evil movies, which were so bad that I started laughing halfway through, but nonetheless disappointing. Thank you to anybody that watched this, if there is somebody.